So let's move right ahead. I'm going to ask Kathy Aronson to come up and give the IPv6 IAB IETF activities report.
Hi. So I guess we're behind schedule. Super awesome. This guy was from my yard. I just feel the need to throw that in to make everybody jealous. And if you can't see him, they're really hard to see. It is an L. I was just sitting on my porch. Anyway, this is my little disclaimer. Not an official report. It's only really what I care to report. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on that you won't know about, but that's okay. So I subscribe to the attendee list simply so that I can make this slide. And this is my all-time favorite question on the IETF attendees list. Are you ready? Okay. There it is. I couldn't believe it. It was super awesome. Yeah, wow. Google is really good. Somebody should try it. Okay. Anyway, that's the only reason I'm on that list. Hundreds of messages just for that. Okay, so some highlights. This is actually pretty cool. I blogged about it, but ARIN wouldn't publish it because somebody else was blogging about it. But Comcast is 100% IPv6. Super cool. Little mini round of applause. If you want to know more about that, there's some slides. I put the link in the slides. I don't know if somebody else was going to talk about it. Tough, I was first. So I went to the IEPG meeting, which is the Internet Engineering and Planning Group, which is a bunch of operators that get together on Sunday and talk about operational stuff. And most of the IETF doesn't know that we exist, which is cool. So we talked about extension headers, and basically the conclusion of that was that they get filtered and maybe we shouldn't use them. Jeff gave a really good presentation about DNSSEC, and some of the numbers are kind of disappointing. Like, it takes a long time to authenticate, and there's some stats here. There's 11% that do it now, and 20% validating can't resolve in a half a second. So some of these things need to get faster. I'm not really sure what the answer to that is, but his presentation is online if you're interested. Let's see. I don't know why it animates like this. This is really cool. So George Michelson did this whole thing about Torito, and he looked at like Torito Traffic, which is a transition mechanism between v4 and v6, and he found that Microsoft did exactly what they said they were going to do. They turned it off, and there's like this graph where like it just completely went away, which I thought was pretty cool. But there's some tunnels still around, but they don't actually complete. So he has some recommendations. If you're serving tunnels, stop. If you're creating zombie tunnels, stop. So anyway, that was pretty interesting that like somebody actually did what they said they were going to do, and then somebody saw it in their research. Was pretty cool. Let's see. There's a new IPv6 Toolkit. There's a lot of new little tools that you can get to use on your network, so that's worth looking at. Let's see. Yeah, the RTF Open Meeting. Oh, I'm going to talk some more about that in a minute. The technical plenary was really not super exciting, and this time at the upcoming one, there isn't going to be a technical plenary, or there's not going to be anything technical at the technical plenary. I'm not exactly sure. So there's this internet mapping tool. I heard a lot of, now I've heard boomerang routing, trombone routing. There's a lot of new terms for like your traffic goes through another country and comes back to get across the street. And they're starting to look at the internet in terms of like all the traffic goes through these central locations, and how easy is it for the NSA to actually look at all the traffic. It's pretty darn easy. And NSA is building a big data center in Utah that's supposed to be like gathering all your traffic, which makes everyone feel super warm and fuzzy. So you can take a look at that. The IxMap.ca is pretty interesting. So there was some discussion about keeping traffic local, a lot of countries now are really keen on that because if their traffic goes through the US, the NSA is going to look at it. So a lot of it is negotiating with people in different areas to have exchanges to keep traffic local. And the CADA folks are starting to do some traffic analysis just like RIPE does, where you get a little gizmo and they map the world and see where traffic's going. So if you're interested in that, you can look on their website. I went to the Internet Society briefing panel, and there's some slides up online about that. We're so behind schedule, I'm not going to belabor it, but just what, it's been 10 years, what are the problems, that exist on the internet and those sorts of things. Let's see. Yeah, so there's a new research group for information-centric networking. I've talked about that before. Lisa Zhang and some other folks have been working on this for a while. And now the Internet Research Task Force is starting to look at those problems. And if you've never heard a talk by Van Jacobson, when I was doing some research for this presentation, I came across this talk he gave about ICN. And it's really good. Like, if you're really interested in what it's all about, his talks, he takes really complicated things and makes them so that pretty much anybody could understand them. I just love it. Softwires is the group where everything gets tunneled and everything else. And lots and lots of tunnels, V6 and V4, V4 and V6, and there's an endless number of drafts in there. Yeah, I'm not sure if any of them are going to win. And they're working on MIBs for that, so maybe you could manage the tunnels at some point. Let's see. In V6 ops, there's still, we're arguing about, what are we arguing about? There's some conflicts with DHCP-V6 and stateless auto configuration. What happens if you have them both running at the same time? Who wins? What if you get two addresses? I'm not really sure if these problems actually exist in the real world, but people are thinking about them. Also, things with what happens when you roam in V6. It seems like that the people are discovering some problems with that. Yeah, and the ULA situation. So There's some folks in Japan that actually have V6 networks and they're V6 only networks, and so they do a lot of really interesting presentations about what's actually happening in their network. So there's still a lot of things that don't do V6, like Skype, and one of the people said that your Android won't come up unless you have a V4 address, and then somebody else said his did, so I don't know, but these are some of the problems that they've seen in Japan with their V6 only network and trying to get V4 and V6 to both work, which is sort of the opposite of what we all expected, right? That everybody would have a V4 network and you're just trying to get V6 to work over your V4 network, but they're just the opposite. They actually have V6 only networks. Let's see. Also, like, how do you choose the right prefix? It's the same old multi-homing problem. If you have a ULA, you may or may not always not be connected to the internet, so maybe you need to have a public address. It seems like there's enough address space. Everyone should just use public addresses, but that's just me. IPv6 multicast uses a lot of battery because it's chatty. Let's see. Yeah, autonomic networks. So this is my favorite new pet peeve, self-configuring, self-optimizing, self-healing, self-protecting, self-managing networks. Awesome. And they're starting to say that routing protocols are autonomic, like it just magically figures out its neighbors and stuff, but I still remember having to configure that stuff. So I'm not sure how it automatically configures itself because it doesn't, but.
Does it automatically answer the pager?
I know, right? And it doesn't automatically answer the pager. That was the comment that was made up here. Yeah, I know, somebody still has to manage it. I'm not sure how that's going to work. And then for the IP flow export stuff, they're looking at different ways to couple space and time and relate service quality and stuff with that in the research group. So there is a lot going on with autonomic networks. I'm not really sure the fascination, but now there was also a BOF to talk about autonomic networks, and this is the goal of the BOF. So if you're interested, I don't know, we'll see if it goes anywhere. I can't imagine a network that no one manages, but maybe I'm just one of those operators who doesn't understand, because that's what they told me. Speaking of that, a bunch of us were talking, I'm going to just divert from the slides for a minute. A bunch of us were talking the other night about getting more operations folks involved in the IETF. And I was thinking that we would have a little impromptu table topic today at lunch. So if you sit at my table, that's probably what we're going to talk about, how we get more operations folks involved in the IETF. I don't know. Or we'll talk about something fun. Anyway, these are some quotes from the UCAN BOF. Again, I'm an operator, I just don't understand. Let's see, and there's some drafts that they're working on. Yeah, so I'm not going to go into this too much, but this is basically the IP over lossy latency stuff like machine floor stuff and automatic assembly line stuff. Anyway, the thing that was interesting is that we had an all-time IETF tradition of a whole bunch of people with their implementations coming together and plugging them all together and making them work, which was really cool. And there's some information about what worked and what didn't work and who had implementations that interoperated and stuff, which, like running code, which is what the IETF used to be known for. So it's kind of neat. So let's see. Yeah, so in the operations area, Chris Grunderman will be at our lunch topic table, I hope, because he's really involved in trying to get operations people involved in the IETF. And that's what they're working on, these guys. There's a link. Let's see. So delay tolerant networks. I hadn't really thought about this until they were presenting it, but like something really far down at the bottom of the ocean, there's a lot of delay there. I've always thought about Mint and the planets and stuff, but I never really thought about a rover underneath, a couple of miles down or whatever. So there was a BOF to talk about, how this would be done, and I don't know, there's protocols being written and all sorts of things. So the Pastel award winner, whose name escapes me right now, but he gave a talk. The Pastel award winner doesn't usually give a talk, but he gave a talk. And he single-handedly brought the internet to Nepal. There's pictures of him on cell towers, and he finagled equipment out of people in rooms like this. And it's so cool. The work that he did is just amazing. And then during the plenary, actually something we should try here, maybe not, I don't know, but they took an Etherpad and they decided they wouldn't have cues at the microphone, they would just have an Etherpad, and when your name came up on the Etherpad, you should make your way to the microphone to make your comment, and somebody took over the Etherpad and started projecting things that perhaps they didn't intend. So we went back to queues and someone calling on people. But it would be kind of cool to not have to stand in line, right? So in theory, maybe they'll figure it out. But it was did you not think we were going to take this over? was the first comment on the Etherpad. It was pretty good. We're probably going to talk some more about the government transition of all these functions. But the IETF is working on their piece of it, the protocol numbers and the stuff that they need from the IANA. And they're talking about how they want to, put their input into the process. But the whole time that we're having this working group, somebody's computer Skype contacts were scrolling on the screen, and no one could figure out why. It was cool. And people in the room's faces were there. That's really cool. So in V4 sunsetting, they're talking about how you tell a device when it comes online, how do you tell it, oh, you know, this is a V6 network, you can just turn your V4 off. So there's some work being done to figure out, you know, do you do that with V6 DHCP? Do you do it with V4 DHCP? How do you tell the device, oh, don't do V4 anymore? Because they default, a lot of them. If you have both addresses, it defaults to V4. So this is some of the work that's going on there. Let's see. Yeah, and I don't know why this isn't actually an RFC at this point. Like, we should be starting really to push V6. Like, standards should be V6. They should favor V6. You know, we should just do enough V4 to support V4 to keep it, you know, like, so it doesn't all break and it still interoperates. But it got presented again. Someday it'll be an RFC, I hope. And there's a couple more drafts that are interesting at the bottom. So the DHC group is celebrating its 25th anniversary. Awesome. That's kind of scary, actually. That's like right when I started doing networking. Yeah. So there's some stuff going on in the dynamic host configuration group. Yeah, let it never be said I am against doing worthless work. There's some good quotes. Here's some other drafts that are being worked on in there. DNS ops. There's a lot of work being done with the distribution of the root to try to make it so that if you don't have access to the root, maybe you could still function, so that recursive resolvers can still function even if they've lost their connection to the root for a while. And I think that's probably more important as we have more and more top-level stuff. Other drafts are on how to scale the root. Yeah, so I blogged about Lee Howard's draft. I hadn't come across it, and then I read it, and I thought it was really great. You know, there's all these pathologies with V6, and, you know, like what happens if somebody port scans your /48 and brings your whole network down and all that kind of stuff. Well, when you have your forward DNS and you have your reverse DNS, and they're supposed to match. A lot of things expect them to match. They at least expect the reverse DNS to be populated. Well, if you populate a reverse DNS zone file for a /48, it takes something like, I don't know, 38 trillion years or something, because it's so huge. So, and I don't know, I hadn't really thought about that. But it's something like, if you do 1,000 entries written a second, a /48 would take 38 trillion years. So we have to kind of figure out how to know, like, what addresses are being used, and then how to make sure, or maybe we take away the requirement that the forward and reverse DNS match, or that there is a reverse DNS. I'm not really sure how to solve the problem, but it is really an interesting read if you have a chance. Homenet. Still arguing about how many routing protocols in a home, what should the routing protocol be in the home. There's a lot of interesting, I just don't think I'm ever going to run ISIS or OSPF in my house, but I'm an operator and I don't understand. So, huh?
Speak for yourself.
I know, RS will, and Yariyak will, maybe like 5 of us. Owen will totally have, and Jason will all have routing protocols in their home. But, you know, ordinary folks, not so much. Yeah, I mean, that just means you're extraordinary. That's all. It's good. Some more drafts that are going on in Homenet. Let's see. Yeah. So I don't usually go to Grow, although I did present there like a couple years ago. I'm trying to think of what I wanted to say about this. Network manners. So there, you know, everybody's talking about routing security. There's a new routing manifesto about, you know, what you should do, what you shouldn't do. Maybe people should filter. That would be good. Then, you know, you can't black hole the internet, that sort of stuff. Yeah, BGP route leaks is still, you know, a problem. And I guess the theory is that if everybody filtered, then we wouldn't need to do like routing security stuff. Because the probability of everyone doing RPKI is lower than the probability of everyone doing route filtering, according to Jeff. It's true, I think, right? Okay, so I'm gonna end on this note. So how many geeks, these are compliments of Paul Anderson, how many geeks does it take to configure a VT220 terminal to connect to the IETF network? Well, let's see, there's Joel and Warren, and there it is, super awesome. And they had to, I don't know if you can see it, is it here? Wait, it's here. There's where they spliced the cables. I have a picture somewhere of them with the little meter to, because you know, it's like, it's the old cable and the new cable. Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Terminal room had a terminal.
It had an actual terminal in the terminal room for the first time in what, I don't know, 10 years or something? And then I had to go get it and schlep it down for Paul at the end of the day. Here's some of the links to get to the various things. I like the daily dose a lot, but anyway. And then if anybody has any questions. I love the camera on my cell phone. It just makes me so happy.
Any questions for Kathy?
I have a comment, actually. First of all, Kathy, I don't know how you do this, but in such a short amount of time to give us a sense of the entire scope of an IETF meeting is truly astonishing. You do this beautifully well. The second thing about these self-operating systems, I'm waiting for the self-peeling potato.
That would be cool. Owen?
The microphone isn't on.
It's not on.
I'm
Oh,
speaking
there.
into the microphone. I don't know. Okay. So the DHCP Slack stuff is a real-world, real
Oh,
problem.
great.
And the problem is that when the IETF designed DHCP and Slack, they sort of specified some of the things about how you choose one or the other, but they didn't really cover all of the cases of what happens when one thing answers one way and another thing answers a different way, and how hosts are supposed to behave when they get conflicting information, or how they should behave when the information that they're getting changes. And so all of the different implementations of hosts ended up implementing those things differently, and not necessarily by design in all cases, versus just accidents of what the code happened to do and what order they happened to process things. So there's a lot of different behavior out there as a result under different circumstances, and I think the current effort is to document what currently happens and then think about what we should do for standards as to what should happen.
Thanks, that's cool. I know that the folks in Japan, the WIDE group, and they've done a lot of work with this because they actually have live networks that have these conflicts, but I didn't know whether they were seeing that particular problem. They've hacked the DNS to send back things to tell them to. It's pretty interesting that to.
They've got a particularly interesting mess created by
I don't know. We're not going to single out. Anyway, thanks, you guys.
Thank you, Kathy.